Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. You all live in a beautiful place, and I feel very fortunate to join you. I'm here today to talk with you about entrepreneurship. So usually when we hear about entrepreneurship, we hear very short quips of extremely successful people. And the reality is, it's fairly easy for most of us to look kind of good in a short quip. But what we don't hear about is some of the failures, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles that entrepreneurs go through on their journey. And so today, I would like to take my time to share a very, very personal story of my own journey with you, and also share 8 learnings that I have discovered along the way in hopes that they'll be useful and inspirational to you. This is when I first knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm age 4 here, and when I had to kill time at my parents' office while they were working, I would take sort of 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper and cut them up into tiny little squares and tape them together into bracelets, and then go around to my parents' coworkers and try to sell them to my parents' coworkers, which I'm sure they loved. But actually pursuing the path of entrepreneurship as a career turned out to be much harder. Having the dream was one thing, but the actual pursuit was much more challenging. It took me a while. I had a little bit of a slow start. So I went to college, I went to Stanford, I worked at Google for several years, and it was only at age sort of 27 that I first sort of set out on my real sort of journey of entrepreneurship. So here I am on my very last day at Google. And if you think about it, I'm leaving like a fairly prestigious, well-paying job, and I'm going into the great unknown. I've never been an entrepreneur before. I don't know what I'm getting into. I don't know if I'm going to like it. It was a fairly big leap for me. And you might ask, was I totally crazy? And some people might say yes, because when you look at the data, data shows that at least 90% of technology businesses fail. Some people will tell you this number is even higher. And I'll tell you that even the 10% that succeed very often aren't wild successes, but very often are sort of struggling to get by and manage to stay afloat. And so you could say that anyone who pursues entrepreneurship is, in some sense, a little bit crazy, because you have to expect those failures. I'm really glad that Paul talked so much about failure, because that's a huge part of being an entrepreneur. Even when you are successful, you're continuously running small experiments to sort of test which direction your product should take, and those turn out to be failures much of the time. So I had an idea. So here I am, I just left Google, and I have an idea, and I decided to set out and start a nonprofit career building for recent college graduates business. And so I do what I know how to do. I start to go talk to people I deem experts. So I talk to people who've worked at nonprofits for a long time, people who know a lot about programs for recent college graduates, and people at organizations that are in the relevant space. And I ask them for advice. I tell them, I'm really excited, I'm starting this business, what do you think? And the responses I get, almost uniformly across the board, are, I'm not really sure that's going to work out. I have concerns about it for this reason and this reason and this reason. And my response, being brand new to this, brand new to entrepreneurship, is to completely write it off and decide, okay, the experts say this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. I give up. And I gave up on that path. And what I learned from this experience is that in entrepreneurship, the rules get changed, because entrepreneurship changes the rules. The type of people who have been successful by climbing the ladder and going to the top of an organization and working there for years and years are the people who are really good at following the rules and staying within the lines. And they're not necessarily the best people to give entrepreneurial advice for someone who's trying to branch out and try something totally new. So I'll gloss over a few sort of additional failures and other experiences here and tell you about the time when I decided that I really wanted to get serious, and I really wanted to found a startup that works. and I really wanted to sort of invest my life in this and make this work. And so my first response at this point is to spend a lot of time with these, reading books. I spent a lot of time talking to other entrepreneurs. I made a list of 100 different ideas that I thought I might potentially pursue. And then I would take frameworks from the books that I was reading and apply them to the different ideas to think about sort of which idea I think has the highest potential of being successful. And I spent a lot of time on this. I didn't spend a day or 2 days or a week, or a month, I spent 2 full months sort of staring at my list. And there came a day when I was sitting there sort of staring at my list, trying to decide which direction to take, applying one of my frameworks, and I realized that every single day I was spending evaluating this decision was a day that I wasn't spending actually working on a product. What I learned from that experience is that quick decisions are usually better than right ones. This was a hard-learned lesson for me because I had grown up always thinking that there's only one best way to do everything, and there's no reason not to do things in the best possible way. But it turns out that's not necessarily the most successful mentality in the world of entrepreneurship. So for example, I used to think that visionaries who had visionary business ideas would start with their vision and then on a linear path work until they achieved that vision. And it turns out that's very, very rarely what actually happens. And in fact, the day that Mark Zuckerberg founded Facebook, he didn't set out to sort of change the way people communicate in the world. That vision came later as he started to realize the impact that Facebook had made. And similarly, Instagram, when Kevin Systrom founded Instagram, he didn't even know he was building a mobile photos app. He thought he was building a check-in app and a way to meet up with friends. And only after he realized that photos was the most popular feature of the app did it turn into a mobile photos app. And so very often, the quick decisions and sort of moving forward, even if you aren't totally sure you're making the right decision, turns out to be better than right ones. So my next startup, I finally did make a decision, and my next startup was called Copywriter Central. It's an online marketplace for elite, pre-vetted, top-tier business writers to connect with writing opportunities. And this was very challenging for me. I didn't have a programming background, and in the beginning I was completely on my own. And so I had to learn Ruby on Rails so that I could build the web app. I was doing UX, UI. I had to learn some basics of design. It was a big leap for me. And I was working through this, and I was trying to connect with sort of other entrepreneurs and hear about their experiences and sort of stay as encouraged and motivated as I could. And there's something interesting that I noticed in the technology industry. So this is a Y Combinator class, Y Combinator being one of the most prestigious technology company incubators in the world. And this is a typical class. They run a couple classes a year. And does anyone notice something strange about this picture? Yeah, it's almost all guys. The blonde woman that you see sort of on the slightly left-hand side of the screen, that's actually Jessica Livingston, who's the founder Paul Graham's wife, who helps to run the program. And there is a dearth of women in Silicon Valley and in the technology entrepreneurship space in general, even in other countries around the world. Now, to be fair to Y Combinator, they actually claim that their statistics are about 11% women overall. So this picture may be slightly misrepresentative. But nonetheless, there's a severe shortage. And I've been trying to figure out why. It turns out that in the US, 18% of computer science majors are women, but only 7% of technology company founders overall are women. And this was really lonely for me. As I was trying to be a technology company founder and looking for people to learn from and peers, I really struggled with sort of being alone. And as I thought about it, I realized more and more that diversity drives innovation. This is just common sense. If you have a group of people who are all similar to each other, you're not going to get such innovative ideas as if you have a group of people who are more diverse. So a friend told me about this program called Technovation. It's a mobile app startup competition for girls that takes girls through an online curriculum that teaches them to come up with ideas of problems in their community that it might be possible to solve using a mobile app. And then they go through some design thinking training, they do some research, they actually build out the mobile app to solve the problem they identified, and then they make a pitch to a panel of judges, much like an adult entrepreneur would make a pitch to a panel of investors. And I started off as a volunteer for the program, and I was so inspired to see girls ages 10 to 18, teenage girls, doing what my peers, professional women in the technology industry, were not doing, which was starting real businesses to solve real problems. And in the meantime, my startup, Copywriter Central, I ended up selling it off to a competitor in a modest acquisition. Nonetheless, it was satisfying to sort of see it move on. And after spending a little bit of time with Technovation, I joined the program full-time as the executive director. And here I'd like to share with you a quick 3-minute video about the program, because I think as much as I can tell you about the program, it's more inspiring to see the girls who are involved in the program talk about it themselves.
Team Health in a Drop comes to us from Moldova. Now the team will present their solution for finding clean water in an area where almost 80% of the population lacks access to drinkable water.
In our school, we have 67 students who suffer from hepatitis A. Since colonial period, the natural resources of the Amazon have been exploited to benefit the European market.
Houdini is not only useful, but a potentially life-saving tool for people like me who have life-threatening food allergies.
In South Korea, $300 million worth of raw materials are wasted through paper receipt.
For me, it's crazy to think that idea that I can walk into a room of people who work in the technology business and have a conversation about anything from a business plan to a code.
It's definitely been an interesting way to learn how to speak in front of people, to convince people, to sound confident even if you're not.
I think the most rewarding thing was just working together and getting to know each other and just playing off each other's strengths, playing off each other's weaknesses, and just really coming together as a team to put together this app.
Over the last couple of months, I think we've all learned that anyone can code as long as we have the will to do it and we have the imagination.
The things you learn is stuff they will never teach you in class, and maybe if you don't do this program, you might never learn it at all.
I'm very happy, I'm excited, I'm tired. I am crying.
I said that Technovation gives hope in our lives.
So Technovation gives hope in our lives. And I think the lesson there is that entrepreneurship gives hope in our lives. And what I think is really interesting about the results of the program is that the students who finish the program, very often when we ask them about their experience, don't talk about the skills that they gained necessarily or the particular programming methodologies that they learned. But instead they talk about how they started from scratch to develop something that made a difference in the world. And I think that type of feeling is the feeling that sticks with people and is really inspiring as people think about entrepreneurship as a career and a path. And so what I'd like to do now is share just a few particular stories of Technovation teams who've been especially inspiring to me and taught me something along the way. So I'm going to start by taking you to Dharavi, one of the world's largest slums just outside of Mumbai in India. So we have a number of teams in Dharavi. These girls work as household help in people's homes and earn roughly $1 a day by day. And then in the evening, they come to the local technology center, which is led by a local social entrepreneur named Naneet Ranjan. And Naneet's vision is that he understands that if the people in Dharavi are able to make products that they can then sell outside of Dharavi to the rest of the world, then there's a path for them out of poverty. And so he's really interested in teaching technology skills to people in Dharavi for that reason. And he understands that the first step along the way is giving some of the students their technology skills and the inspiration that they can sort of make a difference in their lives with technology. So we see some interesting apps come out of this. One in particular is a clean water app. Evidently in Dharavi, there are not that many clean water sources. And so if you're looking for clean water, you have to go to one of the water sources and then stand in line for a really long time. And one of the teams of girls developed an app that digitally holds your place in line, so that if it were adopted, then it means that people wouldn't have to wait in line for hours and hours and kill all that time waiting for their chance at clean drinking water, but instead could digitally hold their place and show up when their time came. Another example is some of the girls cited that they felt uncomfortable and unsafe walking around, and so they developed an app that in a quick button would make it possible to notify their friends and family silently of their location and that they're feeling in distress in one way or another, and let people know where they are and so that they can come find them if they need help. So what I learned from this is that entrepreneurship matters. These are fairly small-scale entrepreneurs. Probably they're not the types of innovations that venture capital firms are going to pour lots of money into, but they do make a difference. If they're adopted in the local community, they do make a difference for the community that they're adopted for. So next, I'd like to take you to Stefanetsky, Moldova. So this community is very different in that it's very rural, but it has some commonalities as well. And you may have seen these girls in the video. In their community, 80% of the population lacks access to clean drinking water, and they've had, as they mentioned, a number of classmates who've come down with hepatitis A as a result. And so they came up with an app that maps out the local wells on the screen of your mobile phone and then enables local scientists to tag which ones are clean versus contaminated drinking water to enable people to go to the right water sources to find clean drinking water. And they actually won the competition this past year, which was super exciting because none of them had ever been on an airplane before, or been hardly out of their hometown before, and they came to San Francisco, and everyone was so happy for them when they won $10,000 towards sort of further development of their app. And what I learned from them is that the most important ideas don't always come from the most educated minds. So it's not because they were PhDs or had tons of education behind them that they were able to come up with this idea and make a difference in the world. It's just because they intimately understood the problem and the community. And last, I'd like to take you to Winchester, Massachusetts. So this is a very different type of community. This is a privileged community just outside of Boston. Most people here work in Boston and live in Winchester. It's a beautiful place. The average income is very high for the United States. And you may think, as I did, what problems could these students here possibly have that they're developing apps to solve? And it turns out that these girls came up with an app called Secret Pigeon. And it's designed to combat against peer pressure. And so the way it works is if you're in a social situation where you feel a little bit uncomfortable, it would be sort of social suicide to just stand up and leave. But it would be acceptable if your mom called to take the call and walk out of the room. And so their app simulates your mom calling and also gives you a discreet way of letting your parents know that you're feeling uncomfortable in order to sort of give you a graceful way of exiting the situation. And when you think about it, peer pressure is a problem not just faced by privileged girls in communities in the United States, but faced by teenagers everywhere. And what I learned from them is that solving real problems really requires understanding them first. For me as an adult, it's a little hard to understand why, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, you just wouldn't stand up and leave. But as a teenager, you understand all of the nuances of exactly when it is okay to stand up and leave, such as when your mom calls, and when it is not. And I think that's a really valuable learning and the reason why they were able to develop an app that I, for instance, would never have been able to develop. But those are just a few examples. We have girls all over the world. Every red dot represents a team of girls that worked on developing apps last year. We have even more teams signed up for this year. No teams in Norway yet. If there's anyone in this room interested in helping me work on that, let me know. But this is something that's happening all over the world. Not every app is designed to solve a world-changing problem. It turns out a lot of girls cite one of the major problems in their communities is having to wake up in the morning. No matter where you live in the world, apparently teenage girls have a really hard time waking up in the morning. And so there are a lot of alarm clock apps, in addition to some of the apps that address sort of clean water, deforestation, and some of the media problems.
My mom is just cool saying you have to move on.
Oh, okay.
One minute.
Okay, great. Excellent. And so let me come back to my own journey for just a moment. Technovation has been an amazing experience, but what I've realized is that my own heart lies in entrepreneurship. And over the course of my experience with Technovation, that's cemented even more. So I've thought about my definition of success, and I used to think success meant to be the CEO of a huge company or to have some fancy job title or high pay grade. And what I've learned is that for me, the journey is success. And if I wake up every day and I get to work on shaping the destiny of one of my own ideas, then to me, that is success. And what I hope for all of you is that you find your own definition of success and are able to pursue it as well. Thank you.